Hi, this is Marlene, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on miamighostchronicles.com. Go to marlenepardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good. For those of you who I know are thinking, where's the chicken film? I promise I will get the chicken film soon. And that's for those of you who follow our the video of the new chicks that I have. And one thing I have to add, I had one of my little bantams. I put lattices. I have two sheds out there, and I put lattices so that they wouldn't go under there and lay eggs and have unmonitored hatchings. But I have a little bantam, which I hatched before, and she's really small. Guess what? She got under there, and they put the lattice down. And then, like with it, I know my chickens. A couple of days, I'm like, "Where's this chicken?" Sure enough, she went under the shed. And I undid some of the lattice so she can come out and eat or drink. But she's gonna have some more chicks. So yeah, I'm hoping to get videos of that too. But yeah, it's like, yeah, Marlene's Adventures in Chicken Land. But anyway, guys, let's get on to the important stuff, the interesting stuff, and that has to do with the guest. And this gentleman has been on here before. His name is Lon Strickler. He's been involved with the paranormal, the entire field, everything. But for those of you, for many years, for those of you who are not familiar with Lon, let me give you a little bit of information about him. He is a Fortean researcher, author, and publisher of the syndicated Phantoms and Monsters blog, which he began in 2005, and it has steadily grown in popularity and is read on a daily basis by tens of thousands of paranormal enthusiasts, investigators, and those seeking the truth. His research and reports have been featured on hundreds of online media sources. Several of these published reports have been presented on various television segments, including the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Paranormal Witness, Factor Faked Paranormal Files, and Destinations America's Monsters and Mysteries in America. He's been interviewed on several radio broadcasts, including multiple guest appearances on Coast to Coast AM. He's also been featured on Destination America's Monsters and Mysteries in America with a show about the Sykesville Monster episode. He's written 8 books and is currently the host of Arcane Radio on Beyond Explanation YouTube channel, which, by the way, we'll have a link to the website and the YouTube in the credits of the show. Lon was born and raised in South Central Pennsylvania near the Gettysburg National Military Park and Battlefield. After living in the Baltimore, Maryland metro area for 40 years, he actually moved back to his hometown in 2016. So, welcome back, Lon. How are you doing?
Hey, Marlene, I'm doing fine.
Fantastic. We were already, like I always do, I tell my guests, we were already chit-chatting about everything that's going on in paranormal, cryptid, UFO land, everything that's unusual. And we'll go back to originally, but right before that, we were talking about the Mothman sighting that started back in 2011 in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I bring this is there's a lot of my audience I know which is very familiar with the Mothman story because of the movie that was made.
Right.
But now you were telling me that, well, obviously it's been around. We're talking then 10 years, right? That they've had sightings of it.
Well, it's actually been longer than that. I mean, I've been involved with it when there were 3 sightings back in 2011 in South Chicago. And, from 2011 into 2017, there were maybe a few sightings that went unreported. Though when this started in 2017, we started getting older reports. But winged humanoids and winged cryptids are not strangers to the Lake Michigan area. This stuff's been going on for a long, long time. So, but yeah, this thing kind of fell in our laps in 2017 when some reports started showing up on MUFON. We kind of grabbed it and ran with it and started looking for witnesses and having witnesses contact us, and actually went out and did investigations. So, so currently, I guess now, oh God, I don't even know how many we've had, but I would say it's easily over 125 cases we believe that are legitimate cases. There have been more reports, but some we just can't. Just can't put in that list of verifiable. So, yeah, so that's where we're at. And it has slowed up some this year. But from October 2019 up until recent times, most of the sightings have been in and around the O'Hare Airport and the Rosemont area. Now, why that has been happening, that's something we don't know, though. There has been some possible UFO and extraterrestrial parallels to these sightings and encounters.
I'm gonna for those people who at one point, as in the movie, it was thought as the how can I say it, that seeing it was like a warning. In other words, disaster, something,
Harbinger.
Some people it was either a warning, to some people it caused it. What the different. Have there been any type of events that are linked to any of these sightings?
No, not that I know of. I mean, of course, with the Point Pleasant and the Mothman, the Point Pleasant 66 and 67, it apparently accumulated to the 46 people dying on the collapsed Silver Bridge.
Right.
Well, I don't really buy into the Harbinger theory for the most part. That was some people claim that they saw this winged being above the bridge before the collapse, though that hasn't really been substantiated. Never has been. It's a small town. You have a major tragedy like that, especially right before Christmas. Yes. People are looking for excuses.
Right. I've been there. And you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's a big deal there now, actually. I mean, they kind of embraced it. But, when John Keel got there and started writing about it, that's when all this parallel and Harbinger stuff kind of got involved.
Right.
I mean, there have been sightings worldwide of winged humanoids. And quite frankly, the only instance that I know where a winged being may have been associated as a harbinger of a disaster was at Chernobyl. Several days before the Chernobyl disaster, people had been reporting a large black winged creature. They called it the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Was seen hovering above the reactor. Okay. I mean, is a circumstance or whatever? I don't know.
Let me. What was and I know hindsight's 2020. Did they report that prior to the incident, or was it? Did some after the fact? Oh, by the way, I saw.
There were records of it.
Okay.
There were actual records of it. There was some testimony to it. It wasn't well known, but after it occurred, people went back and looked and had seen that there had been some mention of it by some witness.
Okay, and I think that's very interesting as far as now this one. Let's get back to the Chicago one.
Yeah.
Is there anything that happens that? Because I've been to that area. My son trained for the Navy a little bit, the Great Lakes base, which is, you go up from Lake Michigan. I know what you're talking about. Once you go outside of the city itself, there's a lot of area out there, right on the lakeside, on the lake shore. You go up.
That whole area around the lake, especially on the west side of the lake, it's a lot of green area. It's a lot of open area, rivers, streams. And we have had sightings all up and down from Milwaukee down to, I guess, mid Indiana. We've had sightings all around. We even had a few over in Michigan, over the other side. But the sightings overall have been consistent. I don't believe it's just one being. I believe it's several.
Okay.
Where they're coming from,
Are they? Do they look that like that? The descriptions, are they like that prototypical? I'm going to say the the 1960s Mothman, which is big eyes, and
yeah, the Mothman at Point Pleasant was described as a more insectoid type being.
Right, exactly.
Where it had the moth-like butterfly wings and the red eyes that were kind of, there wasn't really a head. The eyes were set in the upper body. Right. Had detached arms and legs and such. It was, the body was kind of stout. I'd say the average size of the descriptions is around 4 foot or 5 foot. The sightings in and around Chicago have been fairly consistent, though. There have been, one of the early sightings mentioned that it had the butterfly wings that kind of extended up over the head. But for the most part, 95% or more of the sightings have been of a gargoyle-like being, bat wing, membrane wing being that's up to 6 foot in height, dark in color. The wings, like I said, are anywhere from 12 to 15 foot in in span.
That's hard to miss that.
Sometimes the arms are attached to the wings, sometimes they're detached. Some had red eyes, some didn't. The head was usually very small and thin. The body was emaciated.
Okay.
But it looked very humanoid. It would propel itself by unknown manner. It would literally jettison itself off the ground into the air, and then when it reached an apex, it usually screamed.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know what that description reminds me of, kind of? That movie Jeepers Creepers? But without the suit?
People have described it as looking like the Jeepers Creepers.
Oh my God. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
I guess they say that because they really can't compare it to anything else.
Right. I know.
This being itself is something very similar to something I had seen back in 1988.
Okay.
The body style, the red eyes, the height, the wings, the whole 9 yards. I had an encounter with 2 other gentlemen in 1988, and very similar to this, which I think is kind of interesting because, you look at the parallel. Here we are getting these sightings, and my group, and I do have a large group of investigators. We've been getting the lion's share of the sighting reports and have been doing the investigation over the years. So I don't know if we were destined to get it or what, but it does seem interesting.
What was your experience that you had in '88?
Well, I was living down near Baltimore at the time. I was at a Boy Scout, I don't even know what it was, some kind of jamboree or some kind of at the exhibition at Maryland State Fairgrounds. And a friend of mine who I had gone to school with and had been in Boy Scouts together was there. And we hadn't talked in years, though he and I used to go out to the Gettysburg battlefield when we were kids and used to sleep out there at nighttime and see a few things out there. So he was aware of some of the investigations I had been involved with over the years. So, we got talking, and we were sitting there eating lunch, and he mentioned to me, he said, look, let me ask you if you wouldn't mind going up to the old Camp Conawaga with me next weekend, because then he told me that there were stories of campers who had been out camping out the campgrounds, which was actually in the woods by the creek. They were hearing these screaming sounds and was scaring them off. And he said he was interested in finding out what was going on. He was a scoutmaster himself, but he was also heavily involved with the York Adams Council, Boy Scout Council, in South Central Pennsylvania. So, and now this location, Camp Conawaga, is really not that far from Gettysburg. It's closer to a town called New Oxford. But I used to go there a lot as a kid. Well, anyway, I'll go ahead. I'll meet you up there. So when I got up there, he and another guy were there. And a friend asked me, he said, you mind staying the whole week? And I said, no, I'm free. So we'll go out and camp. And, this was back in '88. I'd go camp back then. I can't do it now. I'd be stiff as a board out there now. Yeah. But, we walked into the woods, got up by the Conawaga Creek and camped out there by the edge and, set camp up, had 3 tents up, and we were just sitting around a fire. First night, nothing happened. We did hear some sounds like something was walking in the campground that night. But, I thought maybe it was one of those guys getting up, walking around. So I never thought about what it would have been. Nothing was disturbed.
Right.
So the next morning we got up and, we were going to plan on doing some investigating, walking around all day and see if we could come up with anything where these screaming sounds were coming from. Anyway, that was the report. They were hearing a screaming sound. It sounded like a baby crying or a girl crying, something out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. So we took off into the woods and we were out there a while. I mean, we really didn't come up with anything. And we got back to the campsite, I guess about 6 o'clock, made something to eat. And we sat around the fire, just talking most of the night. And then around 11 o'clock, of course, it was really dark at night, though the moon did let off a lot of moonlight, so we could kind of see things. Okay. I don't think it was a full moon, but it was fairly light because of the moon. Well, anyway, we were sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear this screaming sound. And I didn't know what it was. I mean, the first thing I'm thinking is it's either an owl or some animal that's making a screaming sound. And it was kind of fading in and out. So it was kind of disturbing. I didn't really know what to make of it. Okay. A lot of animals make a lot of screaming sounds. Yeah. So,
that's what I've heard.
I've heard rabbits scream, and it's like bloody murder when you hear them scream. But, we were trying to figure out what it was. So we didn't think much about it. Actually, we were saying, well, if that's all it is, I mean, then that's nothing. So, we went ahead, sat around a little longer, talking football or whatever. And then I got up to stretch my legs. I guess it was close to midnight, maybe a little after. And as I told you before, I'm intuitive. So, okay. I kind of sense a lot of different things,
Sure.
And I was walking around the campsite. I walked out to the trail, which goes along the creek. And I just felt like something was watching us. So, I came on back. I told those guys, I said, look, why don't we go up the trail a bit and just see what's going on? Maybe we'll see some at night with the flashlights. We're nothing else to do. So that's what we did. So we got up and got our flashlights in a single file, walking down the trail with the creek on the right side. And then all of a sudden, I mean, it wasn't more than maybe 50 foot into the trail, we noticed these red eyes in the middle of the creek. Oh. And by the time we got our flashlights on this thing, it shot up out of the creek, and the creek was pretty shallow at this point. Uh-huh. But we saw the form of this thing was dark in color, but these red eyes, and they were bright. and this thing shot up into the air, and a couple seconds up, it screamed, and we heard it going away from us. So we were freaked out, and we got back to the campsite, and my buddy wasn't talking. He was scared to death, and the other guy and I asked him what he had seen. He said, "Did you notice something on the back?" And I did. And it looked like it had structures on the back, like wings. Though I didn't see any wings come out.
Right.
It looked like they were folded wings in the back. So I was surprised, not only by the red eye, but the way this thing just jettisoned up into the air like a rocket. It was amazing. I mean, it was an audible whooshing sound when it took off.
Okay.
So my friend, he didn't want to stay at the campsite. He wanted to go up to the administration building.
I was about to say, did you guys go to sleep after this?
Well, I stayed, but him and the other guy, they went up there and spent the night. Okay. I wanted to see what it was. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I had just seen. But, I didn't hear anything else the rest of the night. And, and it's interesting. I've never really said much about it for about 20 years.
Okay.
I had talked about it with my buddy maybe at another time, but I didn't mention it to too many people. Then when I started the blog, I started, writing stuff. And one day, I think it was 2007, 2008, I decided to write about this.
Right.
And when I did, I started getting responses. I had one guy who had lived at Dick's Dam, which is upstream from where we were, about a mile. Right. And he told me he had been hearing that screaming for 20 years. He said he never knew what it was, So not long after that, I got a phone call from a scoutmaster who told me, he said, a couple weeks ago, we were at a Camp Conewaga, me and my troop. And during the daytime, the kids had been out up on the trail walking, hiking, whatever, just screwing around. And they came running back. They were just, they were distraught. I mean, they said they saw a dragon.
Oh.
And he didn't know what the hell they were talking about. He thought they were pulling his leg. So he just didn't really think much about it. He just told them to stay off the trail with the rest. They were leaving the next day anyway. So, but they never heard any screaming or anything. But he told me
an unusual thing for kids to say they saw a dragon of all things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know, the kids will see something, they didn't really determine what it was. First thing comes to their mind was a dragon. Anyway,
right.
Then he saw what I had written, and he called me and he said, "Well, those kids must have been telling me the truth." Well, that very well could be, but over the years, now that's been 13, 14 years ago when I first reported it. Mm-hmm. I've had 5 other sightings reported to me along this creek. Now, this creek extends for at least 15 miles as it empties east into the Susquehanna River. Mm-hmm. But there have been people that have seen this being at different locations along the creek. Now, I don't know if this thing travels along the creek, flies along the creek.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like that's its territory.
Yeah, and so now they're calling her Old Red Eye now. I mean, that's it's kind of like a Halloween thing up there in that area now. And and now I moved back up there. I don't really live that far from it. But but the description of what I saw was very similar to what people are seeing in Chicago, which I just think is crazy. So, so that's what, it kind of fell on our laps, and that's where we're at now.
Right. And, you also mentioned something that right before, which was one of the theories that's being, as far as some of these creatures, whether they come into our world through interdimensional portal or rips. I know that some people say, well, it's not, sometimes it's by mistake, in other words. whether they're rips or portals purposely or whatever. That's why sometimes you'll get a sighting for X amount of time and then it stops. And, or it comes and goes, or why there's lack of evidence sometimes as far as, for example, to get some type of body for, carcass or whatever you want to call it. What do you think about that theory of them being, if not interdimensional creatures, getting over here through some type of interdimensional portal or doorway?
Well, I think the interdimensional theory may be valid. Like I told you earlier, there has been some UFO and possible UFO extraterrestrial activity around the airport that may be associated with some of these sightings. And in fact, one of the witnesses in Rosemont, which is a suburb just east of the airport, had seen one of these winged beings in the company of a gray alien, and two female humanoids of some type. They look more human than anything else. But, she said as she was observing them, there was this bright blue flash of light. The alien being disappeared, the two humanoids disappeared, and this winged being just took off flying. Now, it's weird because as far as also we've been getting a lot of, especially around the Rosemont area and some of the green areas around that area, we've been getting reports of humanoids. People have been either out biking or hiking, and they see something in the woods or at the distance. They can't make out what it is. They don't see wings, but they see something that just is not right. It's humanoid in nature, but doesn't look like a real human. It looks something different. I don't know if that's associated with it or not. Now, I have talked to people who told me that these green areas around Chicago and out in the counties, there is some issue of witchcraft and occult in some of these areas as well. Now, I don't know if these are summoned beings or what they are.
Right.
I have been, I've always thought that the Mothman of Point Pleasant was a summoned being, actually.
That's interesting.
Think, because of the very strong indigenous energy around the area, especially around that West Virginia Ordnance Works. People call it TNT plant. Some of the EVPs that I have heard taken there, and some of the things I've heard there, suggest that may very well be some type of reason why this thing showed up. Either it was summoned to be a sentinel or a guard of some type.
Okay.
I have had cases where that has happened in areas of old villages or areas where people would concentrate, tribal ritual areas where there may be a very strong energy that seems to be guarding the location.
Right.
So that may very well be, and I don't know if that is part of what's going on around Chicago, but it's just one of another theory, and of course I said the interdimensional, maybe possible parallel universe, something opening up and being able to come in through, I don't know. When you're talking parallel universe, you're talking about an infinite number of realities that this thing could be coming from. Now, if it's interdimensional, you're going to get a limited amount of dimensions, but you really can't tell what it is unless you see it going in and out. And I have had some witnesses who have seen this thing literally disappear on them. Twice I've had two instances where they had seen this thing flying and just literally disappear, like it went through
it didn't fly away to the distance. It just dissolved, in other words.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And those witnesses are very credible because they were, both of them were, one was two very elderly ladies. It happened very near Wrigley Field, and the other one was up in Rockford, Illinois, from an older witness by her and her husband and neighbor who saw it across the street from them just literally disappear in the air. So yeah, we've gotten all kinds of strange circumstances involving these winged humanoids, and as far as really coming down and having an explanation as to what's going on, well, we're still up in the air on it until we get some real concrete evidence. I don't think we're just going to have to go with whatever we can come up with in the meantime.
Right, which at this point is the eyewitness, and I'm sure since you get it from so many sources, you can say, wow, this sounds exactly like what this person saw. People that don't have any type of connection. But since these reports come to you, can say, wow, they are all describing basically the same thing. How could that be?
And we've had reports in other locations as well. I mean, around the same time in 2017, there were sightings of something very similar down in Pasco County, Florida, and around the Zephyr Hills area where this thing was showing up. Very similar to what people were describing in and around Chicago. So, it's something that's just not happening in one place. The winged humanoid phenomena, it really hasn't been very prevalent. Of course, everybody knows the Mothman story and that, but as far as other sightings, I guess people up until more recently have been scared of being ridiculed, afraid of being ridiculed for reporting something like that. So, but people have kind of opened up more and more about it.
Well, the thing is, what I say, for every story that you hear, there's probably other sightings that the people just say, forget it. I'm not about to put I'm not going to be that guy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for people coming forward. I mean, the thing about this thing in Chicago, we've had, especially at the airport, we've had pilots, we've had air traffic controllers, grounds people, supervisors coming forward and telling us about this. Though the airport administrators aren't happy about it. They've been trying to tell people not to report it to us, but we're still getting reports. And of course, in Chicago itself, we've had 2 reports directly from police officers who saw it. And I have talked to other police officers off record who had told me that they have talked to people who swear they saw the same thing. So, City Hall hasn't been very cooperative. We filed FOIA requests, but the city of Chicago just wants to leave it alone,
Of course. Well, let me throw in there my own personal story, because my husband is an ex-Port Authority police officer from New Jersey. He used to work at Newark. That was one of the main airports he used to work out of. And this happened, I'm not sure, it's either late 80s or early 90s. And it's surprising, because a lot of the things that he witnessed that were weird usually happened a lot of times when there were big blizzards blowing in. But anyway, he usually worked during the daytime, but I can't remember why. I think he transferred over to night times. And he says it was like really bad weather, so it was very quiet out he said he was walking across from one entryway to the other, and he sees a blue light coming down, like hitting the area, and he's like, where's that coming from? I believe, if I remember correctly, he said that they had shut down all airline takeoffs and landings, so there were no planes coming in, and whatever planes were there were parked in the, where you come up right next to the, where you get on the plane. I forgot what the word is. So he says that he saw this very bright blue light coming up from above, like hitting down. What he was seeing was, at his level, the blue light, and he couldn't figure out, where is this coming from? So he says he kind of walked out. It was really blowing hard. He says he tried to look up, but it was blowing a lot of snow and he couldn't. And he said all of a sudden, whatever it was just winked out. Like he says, from 1 minute. And he says the next day he goes to see his supervisor, who at one point was a pilot for TWA, way before he got into this job. And he told him, Henry, shut up. Don't say another word. He says, pulled him by the shirt, closed the door to his office and said, come here. I want you to shut up. Don't talk to anybody about this. Don't ever say anything else about it.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And he says, okay, I'll do it under one condition. He says, what? He goes, put me back on days. And he said, that's it. And till this day, he says he can't explain where that light was coming from, what it was, or anything like that. Well, I tell you,
Newark is pretty heavy. Newark Airport is pretty heavy with incidents.
Yeah.
I actually lived in Newark for about 6 months, right very near the airport. And I heard a lot. I was young back then. I mean, that was back in the mid 70s. But I heard a lot of stuff back then. And but no, Newark is pretty heavy with activity. There's certain airports that do have a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Chicago, Denver, a few other ones. But no, Newark is one of those. And it's not unusual. The supervisors and administration people they don't want it getting out because it scares passengers. And
yeah. I mean, you've heard that story about Flight 401, that Eastern flight where they took the leftovers and they reused them, and then they had all these sightings and of the ghosts of the pilots. And from what I understand, the administration was threatening employees that if they talked about it, even amongst themselves, they could get written up and fired, a bunch of stuff, just because of what you said. Nobody who wants to fly the airlines that's haunted, back then. But finally, from what I understand, they were forced to take whatever equipment they had put on these different planes, and just to stop all the stories that were coming their way.
I'll tell you one thing. Every airport's got a haunting story.
I bet.
Really? Yeah, there's some more than others. But every airport has had has haunting stories. Pretty legitimate haunting stories coming from personnel.
Yeah. Despite all the activity that you think.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many people coming in and out of there. People can drag all kind of stuff in there, and this is like anywhere else. People die at airports too, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. But it happens a lot. And UFO reports are nothing for airports. I mean, it's pretty well known.
Yeah, well, and again, who wants, even if those comptroller towers or those they see anything, do you think they're about to say, hey, before you take off?
No, they're not going to say anything. No,
there's something weird going on.
That's why that's why I think we were fortunate to get one of the air traffic controllers to come forward. And quite frankly, he and two other guys in the tower were out in the parking lot on break when they saw this thing. So he wasn't the only one that saw it. I have a friend in Baltimore who's an attorney. His sister is a supervisor for one of the airlines at O'Hare.
Right.
And I talked to her on the phone, and of course, she didn't want her name being used or anything, but she says it's crazy. She says she's hearing something every week from people on the ground. She's in charge of the grounds people and a few other, ticket takers and, people at the gate and stuff. So she's got a pretty important job. So she don't want to jeopardize it, but she told me that, there are things going on and people are seeing a lot of different things. So, I can only imagine what people are actually seeing and not reporting. And in fact, another problem they've had at O'Hare since we've been reporting all of this is, and I've heard this from two security guards, TSA people actually, who they have been making a lot of arrests of people that have been getting out onto the tarmac and looking for this thing.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah. So
wow.
I think the powers to be at O'Hare aren't happy about it. Well, I know they're not happy about it. And what we had one of the bus drivers, one of the bus drivers at the airport tell us a couple weeks ago, because he had a sighting. and he told his supervisor, and his supervisor told him, all you saw was a big owl.
Yeah, right. Okay, sure.
You know, so yeah, that's what they're just saying. It was a big
right,
bird.
and that supervisor's thinking, I'm not going to write up any report about this. No way.
No.
I'm not, because God knows where that could go. Because it's like, of course,
well, it doesn't go anywhere. And in fact, we've had 2 pilots who came to us about these sightings that they had at the airport, and they reported it to to air traffic, and I made FOIA requests to the regional
let me ask you, where are they seeing them? Are they seeing them in flight? Are they seeing them on the ground?
On the ground and in flight, both.
Really?
These 2 pilots actually saw this thing fly in front of them as they were taxiing off the runway. Thing flew right in front of the cabin. Yeah.
It's like, oh, so we're gonna take. That's got to be one of those moments. Like, they must you know how you have those 2 pilots. They must have looked at each other like, "Did you see that? Yeah, yeah. Did you see that? What do we do? Oh, let's go."
Right. I mean, he said he did make a report. I filed, like I said, I filed the FOIA with FAA and the regional, because Chicago's under the regional FAA for Great Lakes, and they didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. They came up with some kind of excuse. So,
of course, you know why? Because there's always going to be that fear that if something happens, then that'll be tied into the sighting of whatever that was. And, it could go in so many ways. And I know there's around the Great Lakes itself, there's always been a lot of strange sightings. It's not only Lake Michigan. And they have all those islands that, people go to mostly in the summertime. Mm-hmm. And along the coast, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in that area.
Yeah, the Great Lakes in general have a lot of strange phenomena. I'd say Lake Michigan's probably the worst, because they've had a lot of what they call USO sightings, where people would be out in the lake and actually see craft come out of the water.
Right.
Yeah, it's even they have an area that's called the Michigan Triangle, and the Michigan Lake Triangle, and that extends across the lake. And there's been a lot of disappearances of small craft, boats, planes, people over the years. So yeah.
Let me ask you, Lon, are you familiar with the Van Meter monster? Well, that sighting, it happened in Iowa, like a long time ago.
Yep.
And when you read that, and then you think, are we talking the same type of creature? Is it, it had so many witnesses that were supposedly saw it.
Yeah, Chad Lewis wrote a real good book about the Van Meter Visitor. That's what it was titled. He and I believe that it was probably a pterosaur type being. Pterosaur type creature.
Right.
And look, pterosaurs have been seen all throughout the country.
Sure.
Midwest is pretty heavy with them. The Van Meter incident, there was actually later on something about a cave nearby Van Meter where this thing had been seen going into. Now, I don't know if anything came out of that, but that book is excellent. It's written by Chad Lewis, the Van Meter Visitor.
So because in other words, you're saying it's not quite as humanoid looking as what these sightings are.
No. This thing had an actual beak and body style like a pterosaur or pterodactyl.
Right. And I know that in recent times there have been 2 sightings of a pterosaur over by Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and out in the Southwest. Some people call it Thunderbird, but the description in some cases are very much like instead of feathers, it's got the wings like a pterosaur, which is a bat-like
membrane-like wings. I have literally had hundreds of sightings of pterosaurs.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there any area that's predominantly that you get most of the reports from?
Um,
Midwest?
yeah, I'd say Illinois, Iowa, Missouri. I had a friend who's passed, but he was a cryptozoologist investigator, and he
Mm-hmm.
believed that these pterosaurs actually have a part of a flyway that run up from Central America up into Texas into the Midwest.
Okay.
I
That's
don't know.
why
That's
not?
never really been proven to me.
Right.
But the majority of sightings in the United States have been in the Midwest area.
Could be. Why not? They follow some type of migration route that
Right.
they only understand or follow for God knows what reason at certain times of the years or whatever the case might be. But that sounds like a very plausible theory as far as and yeah, and the thing is that sometimes you see people that even the sightings of the when you see the Van Meter, it's like way back when there was not that much popularity of dinosaurs per se, as far as you
Mhm.
can say, well, people were like, of all the things to describe that you see in this little town is a winged monster kind of thing that and there was a bunch of people that saw it, which is really interesting as far as and I believe there was also a report. I don't want to say it was around the same time, but out down in Southwest where some cattlemen or some cowboys said they had shot one, but they never were able to bring it back, or they went back to get it and they couldn't find it. Something like
Yeah,
that.
there was one story back in the 1850s, I think, in Utah. There was also one out in California of
Mm-hmm.
this creature that was described very much like a pterosaur.
Right.
But my book, Winged Cryptids, I write about all this stuff.
Okay.
The winged humanoids, winged cryptids has always been something that's fascinated me.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just put stories or reports in there that had come to me.
Right.
Everything that's in that book is something that I've investigated or been a part of. And it's been hundreds of reports over the years.
And it must be, and again, we come back to when you have all these reports from people who have no connection, no way to communicate, and all these reports come to you, and you're thinking they're talking about the same thing, or they're
Mm-hmm.
describing the same, very similar things.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point now I can pretty well listen to somebody describe to me what they've seen, and I just by their description and the way they describe it, I can usually tell if they're something
What they're
actually happened. Yeah, they strongly believe something, they saw something, and
okay.
I take any report I get, I take them for what they say until I
Mm-hmm.
prove otherwise. Because look, I mean, when they have the encounter or the sighting and then they call me, I'm part of that then.
Right.
And here's it to me to tell them they're wrong. So I'll take the information I get from them. And, I do that with any type of
Sure.
investigation I'm involved with, and I go with it until I prove it's, I don't think it's true.
Right. And you know what? And I understand exactly what you mean, because
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, that you say, somebody might be mistaken, but they believe it is that. You
Mm-hmm.
understand? Like
Mm-hmm.
that, like that guy that said, "Oh, you saw a big owl." Maybe there are sightings that what they're seeing is a big owl, and maybe they panicked. Maybe it was nighttime or night was falling, and they were mistaken, but they weren't lying when they said, "I think I saw this," because to them that's what it is. But when you rule out either the ones that are lying or the ones that are mistaken, that still leaves a lot of reports of something that's credible, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it, my point being that you gather all this information, you realize all these different people are coming to me and telling me very similar stories, describing very similar creatures. There's got to be
Yeah,
something to it.
I got a fairly large, sophisticated group that I work with now.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 20 individuals in the group itself nationwide, and about 15 other affiliate groups as well. So I always have people to bounce stuff off of now.
Okay.
And the reason the reason we do it the way we do is that I've got people, for the most part, I can always get to go to a location to check out a report.
Right.
It didn't used to be like that. And for most investigators, it's not like it. I've been fortunate enough with the blog and the connections to be able to get people to come aboard and to really take serious look into whatever people are reporting. And that's what we've been doing. And that really just started, that all came together when we started into this winged humanoid thing in Chicago. The group started building, and more people were becoming interested in cryptids and other phenomena. And it's a pretty good group. It's called the Phantoms, Monsters, Fortean Research. And we look into everything, but it's mostly cryptid activity and, unexplained beings and such.
Have you seen any cross-reporting of UFOs about the same time that you see this thing in Chicago? There's been like that you see
we had one
up?
encounter. Yeah, we had one site, and this is a strange one, but this kind of falls into the connection between possible UFO activity and extraterrestrial activity with these winged humanoids. At the airport, on the cargo area in the western side of the airport, there's a graveyard there. And there's literally a graveyard called Rest Haven Cemetery that is right in the middle of the airport.
Oh,
it's been there for years.
Okay.
And this one gentleman who was working at one of the cargo docks was out on a smoke break about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And he is right across the road from this graveyard. And he says he's out there smoking his cigarette. He sees this very bright oval-shaped craft literally hover above, just show up and hover above the graveyard, and then he sees a humanoid-like being ascending up into it. Now, first thing I'm asked this guy is, will this thing have wings on it? And he said, well, I didn't notice any wings. But the fact that he saw some type of humanoid being pulled up off at 1 o'clock in the morning in a graveyard into a UFO, I don't think anybody's out there, any person's out there for any specific reason. And of course, not far from there, somebody who was a truck driver saw a small alien being walking along the road one evening. So now now that we're getting these possible humanoid, possible alien reports associated with these winged humanoids, and of course with a UFO, you start thinking, now what the hell is there a connection with this? And until we get more, we're gonna ponder it. But I think it's good evidence. I think it's good evidence that there's a connection somehow.
Right, because and the reason why I asked is that I've heard people say that when sometimes they don't pick up on it right when the reports are coming in, or but then afterwards when they go back and they say, wow, there's a spike in cryptid sightings or whatever the cryptid is, and wow, we've also got sightings of UFOs, independent one or the other, and it's like, you get this uptick.
Chicago has always been known for a lot of UFO activity, and that whole part of the Lake Michigan area is well known for UFO activity. But the unusual thing about 2017, when these sightings started to occur, was the UFO activity actually decreased.
Really?
We noticed that, and we were wondering what that was all about. But I really haven't found a connection with UFO activity other than what had happened at the airport. So I don't think there's a connection there per se. I'm not saying it couldn't be, but overall, I don't know. Cryptid activity and UFO activity kind of goes hand in hand in some accounts. Here in Pennsylvania, in particular, we, ever since the 73 flap, where people were seeing Bigfoot and then seeing UFOs and vice versa at the same time, or more recently when people would have a report of a Bigfoot, and then the investigator would go out there a day or two later, and the same area where the Bigfoot was, there are orbs of light flashing and going in and around the trees and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it makes you want to think, well, what's the connection? You know, there's got to be a connection there somewhere, because that just doesn't happen. It's, you know, everywhere. So, you know, it's one of those things, you know, and the investigators I work with and such, we all notice that there does seem to be a fair amount of paranormal or supernatural activity associated with other phenomena.
Let me ask you, when they see these reports, have they said, is there any smell or sound associated with a sighting, or even a feeling, you know, like that you sense it in your body? Is
Yeah, I mean, many times there's a visceral reaction to something like this, where you know, some of these people who had come close to these winged humanoids have actually had weaknesses where they would literally lose their legs. They just fall to the ground, or they become very weak, and and of course they'd have that dread feeling, which happens with a lot of cryptid activity.
Sure.
I don't know if that's some type of ultrasound or something to do with the being itself. You know, there's infrasound. There's always been that theory that cryptid activity and infrasound kind of go hand in hand, because we hear so many reports of it being associated at the same time. You know, we have what we call upright canines or dogman sightings and encounters here in Pennsylvania, which is something we're looking very hard into. I mean, these sightings are a lot of different places, but we've been concentrating in Pennsylvania. And that other being shocked by seeing one of these things, the you know, people kind of get that feeling that to back off, other than being scared of it. You know,
right.
Like,
and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely, you're going to be petrified because you're seeing something that maybe doesn't fit into the reality of your world. But then you get that feeling like I shouldn't be here. Like, I need to get out of here.
That's something we hear all the time. Yeah, I'd say at least half the reports have something like that involved, where it goes beyond just being the shock of seeing it. It's almost like they're being told, you know, telepathically, that, you know, you got to back off or just leave me alone or whatever. Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah, and a lot of people, that's and the reason why I say this also is that, you know, sometimes, and I'm going to say even with sometimes the Bigfoot sightings, you get this thing of like they're all friendly, but sometimes at some of these other cryptids, especially when there's not, I would say you go with your gut feeling, as in that you're someplace you shouldn't be, or you need to leave. In other words, not just because maybe not everybody wants to be friends. How's that?
Well, like I said, when I had that encounter with that winged being, and I had a Bigfoot encounter back in '81, I wasn't thrilled about it. I mean, it was, you know, I wasn't really in wonder of it. I was more shocked by it, but I didn't want to be associated with it. I mean, this thing, you know, go your own way. I don't want nothing to do with you, and I'll figure you out later. But yeah.
Right. And I think, you know, for those people, you know, I'm sure everybody's seen it, you know, like that Spielberg movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where, hey, you know, all we do have to do is reach out and be friends, and we'll do an interspecies exchange. You know, one of those deals. And it's like, that doesn't hold, that's a movie.
That movie has done more, has put more misinformation out about non-terrestrial beings than any other movie out there. I mean, it's a good, feel-good movie. But I wouldn't trust any of that stuff. I mean, I have heard so many horror stories about abductions and experimentation and stuff people have told me over the years. You know, I'm to the point where I wrote a book about it. I mean, there has been a lot of strange things that have happened. Now, I will admit, I believe it was an abduction, but I was actually taken to a location at one point and shown certain things. Now, I wasn't afraid. It was more like they were trying to show me things, but I have heard so many other stories where that just is not the case.
Well, and this is the thing that I tell people, considering that obviously they're technologically more advanced than us. Let's say they don't hate us. How's that? But if you go by all these reports that you have of abductions, probing, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like you have to be wary of a species or whatever you want to call them that looks at us like lab animals or rats.
They all got agendas. They all have an agenda.
Right.
I have a friend of mine who lives down in Florida and Pensacola who I've been involved with for years. He and his family had been involved with abductions many, many years, many, many times. And there was always a particular reptilian being that was part of his abductions.
Okay.
And they do not the reptilians that he has been associated with, he tells me that they do not like humans. They do it out of what they're told to do. They're told to either do this and that with him or to be associated with him or show him this or show him that, but they don't like it.
Right.
And
that. That's what I'm saying. The best you can expect is.
Yeah, it's a whole nother realm there. Alien activity, non-terrestrial activity is no joke. For people who think that it is, and they would like to be, I hear people say, I would love to be abducted. No, you don't. You don't want to be abducted.
I can't understand that.
There's nothing good that can come out of it. Most people that are abducted later at some point or have some type of further encounter. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why they're doing what they're doing, and there's an agenda. And, you really don't always know what they're trying to do. And, really, you don't know what they're up to.
No.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of theories, whether you want, and I think part of the problem is that sometimes we want to put our morality on them, as in good, bad, or, conscious, what's right or wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that doesn't apply across the board to might not even be something that's based out of this planet. That's our human thing going on. But, you can't impose it on something that might be from another dimension, another planet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, their rationality is nothing near to what ours. The only thing I found interesting, and I've heard this from other people that have been involved with these type of activity before, is that these beings seem to be they're more closely related to us in one thing, and that is that they do believe in a higher power.
Okay.
Like a supreme deity of some type.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard that so many times from people who have had these encounters that there is a hierarchy, but there does seem to be a supreme being. And that's for most of these races who seem to, for the most part, work together when they're involved with these abduction scenarios and such. Alien abduction has kind of evolved over the years, to be quite honest with you. It's gotten to the point where at first you'd be abducted, they'd be doing experimentation. It was always the grays and such. And then that kind of got to the point where, people were being abducted for sexual reasons and reproduction reasons. It's always the grays.
Right.
Nothing other than grays. Well, that has evolved more so, I'd say, over the last 20 years or more, to where when you get involved with an abduction or an encounter, you're talking about 3, 4, 5 different races or species of beings that are involved with, you know, with an encounter. And a lot of these are very human-like.
Right. Exactly. And then, right, you hear like what you've described, the grays, the reptilian type, you know, the ones that are very human-like. Then I've even heard of stories of, you know, people that have been abducted throughout several years where they believe they've actually seen hybrids of, in other words, that they've taken genetic material from them and they've made a hybrid. In other words, that this is their child, biologically.
It's their child. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And many times they kind of hold that over people because they, there's been one instance with this friend of mine who, you know, he has been involved with these things for years and years. They literally come into his house. And he has photographed portals and such and beings and all kinds of stuff. His name is David Eckhart. I wrote about him in my book, Alien Disclosure. And he kind of got a bit upset with them over a period of time about a year ago. And he just refused to cooperate with them. And one day they showed up and there was this female girl with them.
Okay.
They wouldn't let him get near her, but David knew that was his daughter.
Okay. So, yeah.
They kind of hold it over them. And I have had talked to other people that the same instant they do the same thing. Brett Oldham's a very well-known experiencer. And they kind of did the same thing to him. They seem to a lot of times when a female is abducted, they want the female to nurture the child for a small period of time or whatever. But when it's a male or the father of this child or this being, they kind of use it as a pawn, you know.
Right.
I've heard so many of similar stories over the years. You know, it's a confusing conundrum, to be quite honest with you. You know, but they do have an agenda, and when you don't cooperate, they're going to try to use what they can.
Right, and they know enough about us to know what to use. In other words, that humans have a weakness towards their offspring, even if it was.
My theory is, and I got a lot of people disagree with me about this, but after all the things I've seen over the years and such, I believe the human race is almost like the primary species, and that these beings that we are seeing are evolved humans from our future that are literally coming back and either trying to write something or trying to gather DNA or whatever to strengthen themselves and such. And you know, I just believe, and from things that have been told to me over this time, that the human race is kind of like a primary species. And quite frankly, I don't think we came from here. I think we've come from other places. I think that, you know, people may say, well, you've been watching too much SG-1 or Stargate and that. I know, you know, that's just the way it is. That's just the way the story comes up. And the evidence that I've seen, that I do believe that the human race is deeply involved with all this, and that we are very much a part of it.
Well, think about it. You know that H.G. Wells, the War of the Worlds, that in the end we vanquish them because they're brought down by what we're immune to. And if you think about it genetically, the humans that are alive now, our genetic material, we've been purged because we've, you know, modern humans have gone through all these different plagues and illnesses. So what's been left behind are the survivors. In other words, genetically, we're superior because we've gone through different strains of sicknesses. You know, and so you have the ones that are left behind are the humans that have maybe some natural immunity, or they're just physically. So as far as the strength of the genetic material that modern humans have, think about it. It's pretty good. Maybe we're more resistant to disease because of what we are right now.
Yeah,
So
I
going
mean,
along with that theory that maybe we're like, man, we need to get their genetic material, not the one from 3,000 years ago. Now,
yeah. Yeah, when you think about it, it's not really that much of a stretch. I mean, why they want human DNA or want to study us or vice versa, whatever, whatever the deal is. There's an affinity between them and us to a certain degree.
yeah,
They
well,
may not
maybe they,
like us, and they may have an agenda that may not be morally right to us, but I
oh, of
think
course
they're
not.
more connected. In fact, I know they're more connected to us than what people want to believe.
Right, which and I know that scares some people, but like I
Oh
said,
yeah,
okay, when you see those
and the
nature shows at
government's never going to come out and say that.
oh no, 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 that's never going to
No,
happen unless,
they're
like I
never going to
said,
say that.
one lands like I don't know in the middle of a highway somewhere where it's like it's never going to happen. Even then, I just think that a lot of it's almost like when you see those nature shows where the lion brings down the gazelle, nobody says, "Oh, what an evil lion! It killed a little deer." Because we want to put our morality on it. Maybe to them, what they're doing is like they might not like us, or they might not see what's the big deal. That maybe that they are just using us or experimenting on us for their own selfishness in the sense of maybe their genetic material is depleted. Who knows? It could be
Well, they may
something as
be
simple as
like
that.
us. It may be like us in any animal to the degree that they want to survive, and that they may need
Right.
us to survive. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But that they have no compassion maybe towards us. Sure. And it's a scary part. I think that's the part that scares most people.
Well,
That
from things I've heard and from the evidence I've had and things I've experienced, I don't think there's much of affinity for us from what we think. But if they can take it, I think they're going to take it. I mean, may try to keep them from doing it, but it's not going to. For the most part, I don't think it's going to really make much difference.
well, let's see what eventually one day something will happen that. And,
it will.
And this is what I think. I think we're waiting for the big disclosure. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to have to be something that occurs, as in that there's no way to deny it. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, something's going to have to happen to the point where they can't deny it anymore.
Right.
I mean,
right.
There's going to have to be either an attack or the saucer or ship lands on the White House lawn or something.
Yeah, there you go. Yes,
where it can never
like
be
that.
denied again, or
Yes, and then that's it. It's like okay.
Yeah,
None of that.
Like
It was a weather balloon.
Like I told you earlier, we're being spoon fed,
Sure.
with these disclosures. I've got a friend of mine who's very, very into UFOs and ufology and the history of, all of this from the very beginning. He believes there's going to be a big disclosure in June. I don't know.
Okay, you heard it here, guys.
I am
what happens.
skeptical of it.
I think it cost them a lot back in 2017 to actually admit that they were funding a program to study UFOs, but they didn't say extraterrestrials. They were just saying unidentified. They didn't want to
But what they were doing was a drop in the bucket.
Oh, sure.
They were spending $30 million on a program.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
Right, but they kind of admitted
what they're not
something.
telling you is what you want to figure out.
Well, yeah. Well, it's almost like we'll give them this little bit, just to get them all excited, and let's see how far that'll take us.
Yeah, I don't get too excited when the government starts coming out and saying that we're going to put some type of disclosure out, or we're going to tell you something that you don't know.
Well,
yeah,
what? I think
whatever.
also what's happened is that, let's face it, nowadays with everybody basically carrying around a camera as in their phone, perhaps years and years before people would actually see stuff. But let's face it, you had a camera, no.
Mm.
So now that there's more people that are able to capture some type of proof or something, it's like, okay, wow, we can't go the route of denying it or calling it a weather balloon or clouds or whatever all the things they've named it that it's not. So little by little they're dragging their butt on it. But no, I agree that it's not going to come from that end. It's going to have to be something that occurs where it's like, no, you're going to have to come out. And even then they will. And you know what? And this is my theory. Contrary, I think, to what a lot of people expect, I think there's more that they don't know than what they actually do know.
Yeah, there's a lot they don't know.
That people will say, well, what's this about this and this? And they'll go, we don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? Because, of course, everybody's thinking along the X-Files kind of theory where the government and the aliens are deeply embedded. And they're like, you mean there's a lot of stuff you don't know? No, we don't. You mean that they could be wanting to, like, what? Yeah, that I think would scare people more. Or for them to admit that, yeah, they have some information or whatever. I don't know if there's any technology.
I could tell you stories, which I'm not going to tell you, but I could tell you stories where
don't do that.
It has been proven to me with my encounters with government types that they know a lot less than what you think they know.
I bet.
Because a lot of us who do this fringe investigating, the woo or whatever you want to call it, that get deep into it and start figuring things out. Then, especially for us that start publishing this stuff, they make themselves known to you that they really want to know what we're looking into. I have been approached 3 times in my years of doing this by government types.
Yeah,
about a case or something I've been involved with, and they either ask you.
They're hoping that because of all the reports that you're going to get, that you're going to fill in the blanks for them.
Well, that may be, but they don't really come out and tell you why. But a lot of times they'll listen to what you have to say or ask you questions, and then if they don't like what they're hearing, they'll ask you to back off. I backed off on a couple things before because look, I just don't want any. I don't have problems with people, but and they have actually told me to stay away from certain people or asked me to stay away from certain people, which I have done. And I was elbow deep into a case one time where a gentleman thought that there were some type of government agency that was watching him, and he was coming up with all kinds of proof and crazy stuff and video and pictures and such. And I was sitting on the stuff for about 6 months, and then I let it slip out when I talked to somebody I really shouldn't have told it to. And about a week later, I had a visit.
Whoa.
And they literally told me, look, you got to back off. This guy's a problem. And they didn't really go into detail, but I said, okay.
Yep. In other words,
problem there.
Right. Like, don't become part of don't want us to think that you're a problem.
Yeah. We've got a situation now where the case that we're working on, or one of my associates is working on, where they've got possible government involvement in it now on his property, and we're just telling him, be cool.
Yeah.
Don't threaten them. If they come up to you and ask you something, just be very cordial with them.
Sure.
And you don't want to get them on the wrong side. Have you getting on the wrong side of
course. And that's what people don't realize, that sometimes, like, in other words, don't think that you're in the Hollywood movie kind of thing.
Because it's not. You're not going to get an advantage over them in any instance. So, but it does happen. I've heard horror stories from a lot of people that have had investigating cases, and unfortunately, some of them just you never seen again. And
I've heard of that.
I think that has to do with just getting this attitude that I can keep doing what I'm doing, and
Well, you know what? I think that saying about live to fight another day. Sometimes some stories or some investigations, you put them on the back burner.
Yeah.
Because that's the wise thing to do. If, let's say, you find yourself in that scenario, and later on, maybe you could take it up again, where some things come up, but sometimes that is the wisest thing to do.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson after 40 years.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And you know what it is? It's usually, like you say, usually when you get that feeling is because you're getting close to target.
Yeah.
Because if you're way off, it's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. He's saying that's okay. Yeah. Sure.
But actually,
Perfect.
that's the fun thing about it. This is what makes me want to do what I do. Getting involved with reports and accounts and cases where, we have no idea what's going on, and we start to dig, then people started taking notice, and then, things get a little hairy sometimes. And,
Right.
but I enjoy that. So
Sure. And,
yeah.
and sometimes it is what it is, but yeah, there's, especially now, I want to say in the last few years that, again, because people have cameras, because people have proof, because people are learning to coordinate communications. Did you see it? I saw it, whatever. Or you have people that are trained observers as witnesses. That is like, okay, several of them, how many people can you make like their eyesight was bad, or they're going crazy, or they didn't see what they saw? Yeah. So, but yeah, there's, again, I'm going to stick to my theory that I think that despite what everybody thinks, I think they don't know. I think a lot. They don't know a lot. And they're like, how do we ever explain that we're trying to hide our own ignorance? Because it could go either way. When people want to say, are they friendly towards us? We don't know. We're not sure. Well, how many types are there? Well, we kind of think, but we're not sure. In other words, there's no concrete answers to be given. And then people will be like, okay, so they could be planning to come and take us over in 3 years. You wouldn't know, right? You mean you don't have no ambassador over there with them? Nope.
No.
And that's what I'm saying. And you made a point. People sometimes are conditioned by what they've seen in the movies or in TV shows, thinking that that's really the state of what's going on behind the scenes. And it's everything but that.
I've always had a lot of theories about movies and TV shows with some of the stuff that have been implied with them. And you got to wonder if they're being told or, what to put out there. I think to a degree they do. I think if they put something out that got a little too close to the truth, that they'd be stopped somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I have talked to people involved with productions of TV and movies and such over the years. And, it's just like when you got to get through the censors with stuff. I think if you start getting into a story, or even though it may be fictional, you start getting something that kind of hits home, you're going to get told to back off. And I think that happens.
Right. Or, hey, why don't you make up this great UFO story about, and give this the theme. Yeah, just this is great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Way to go. That's fantastic. Well, as a matter of fact, you need some funding for that. You need something for your budget, for your film budget. But yeah, I agree with you. And then there's others that sometimes have a little bit of truth, but very little. And it's too much drama. But if you look in between the lines, you pick up a little bit of the truth of what really is there. But yeah, let's see if what you said about June, God, that would be great. Wouldn't that be exciting?
We'll see.
I can tell. A lot is like, yeah, well, I'm not holding my breath.
He actually, he wrote an article that I posted on the blog today about this. He said, look, this article is time sensitive. You got to get it out by June. And I'm thinking to myself, well, and I hadn't read the article, but I went and read it today, and I posted that. I thought, we'll have to wait and see. The guy, he's very good at what he does.
Okay.
He's an encyclopedia with ufology back to the very beginning. Anytime I have a question about something, I go to him about it. And but he's got this theory that June's going to be the month, so we'll see.
Man, talk about everybody forgetting about the economy and COVID, right? That'll
Mm,
be like the what? No, did you hear? It's the extra. That's it. It'll
yeah.
be like forget 2020. The year was 2021 when we had full ET disclosure. Wow. Yeah. See, I'm getting overly dramatic. I'm thinking of the headlines. Anyway, Lon, thank you so much. It has been absolutely great to have you on the show. I've enjoyed so much talking to you and listening to your stories. You better believe it, that especially if June we get a disclosure, I'm
Yeah,
going to
I
be
think I'm
asking
going
you
to be
to
getting
come.
a phone call from you.
You better believe it. You better
Yeah.
believe
Well,
it.
see, I posted it today, so it went out to everybody who reads the blog.
Okay, and you
So,
know what? For my podcast listeners, what's the website? Because I want to have the web link on the credits of the show, but for the podcast listeners, what's the website that they can go to find your
well, it's
blog? And
pamsandmonsters.com.
okay,
And the story, I don't even forget the title of the story.
but they'll find it
Uh,
for today, which is May
yeah, it
13th.
was today. People that have the newsletter will get it. But yeah, if you just go to the blog, it's the second story or second
Okay,
article that I posted today. You'll see it.
perfect. Again, thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful to have you on. Take care and good luck to you.
Okay, I thank you, and you take care.
Bye bye. Wow. I'll be right back with you guys because, well, you know what? This thing with Lon, so many interesting theories, so many interesting things that we talked about. And I bet you're all going to be wondering, is June 2021 going to be the day? So interesting. What Lon was explaining about all these sightings, um, different people, different sources, describing very similar things. I'm sure all of you have heard at some point theories about there's a dovetailing of sightings of cryptids depending there's different types of cryptids with UFOs and other type of phenomena, and sometimes it's not immediately apparent. It's only after somebody looks at that time period and says, wow. At the same time, we had sightings from all these different sources, and sometimes these are people that, in other words, they're not they're looking for different things, or they're witnessing different things, but it's in that either that same area, it could be hundreds of miles, but some type of the same area, or um, there's just there is it's almost like you know people seeing UFO. I've even heard of people who have never ever had a sighting of anything, nothing, UFO, cryptid, nothing, period, zip. And it's almost like in this compressed period of time, this window of time, they actually see and witness or something, um, everything. They might see uh, lights in the sky, some strange phenomena, and then within a few days, they have a cryptid experience. And by this, I mean, because a lot of people think sometimes that a cryptid experience is, like a face to face encounter, like that you actually see something. But sometimes people will have experiences where, God, I've heard so many stories. Let's say people that are they're outdoorsmen or hunters, people that have grown up in a certain area and they're very familiar with animals and what's out there, in other words. And they'll all of a sudden they'll hear something that they know this is not an animal that, like, in other words, I've heard all the different animals and bird, whatever, even some people say, well, some animals, they make, if they're in the mating season, they'll make very unusual noises that some almost human like. But these are people say, no, I know what all these different calls are. I've lived out here, or I've hunted out years for years and years, and I know that this, I've never heard this before, or I've heard, things like that. And sometimes they don't have a face to face, but they have a close brush with something that they know doesn't belong, whether it's something that stalks them or even follows them. I've heard that what Lon was describing, people being in campsites and hearing something coming through their camp. I've heard of, I've even heard of prey being taken, something that, let's say somebody's hunting and that prey is taken and they're not sure what it is, but they know. And it almost happens like, it's almost like they have very weird, unusual experience in a very small, compressed period of time. Stuff that sometimes there's people that never, ever have them. These people have things and they're like, are these things connected? And I think there's enough reports of people having very, high strangeness, that's why people think, are these things connected? Is there an extraterrestrial slash cryptid connection? And I'm sure some of you have heard, like he was saying, he was describing where this person saw a cryptid basically being discharged or put into some type of craft. I heard that one of these stories connected to Skinwalker Ranch out in Utah had something similar from somebody that saw something, same thing, some type of weird cryptid. I think it was coming out of a spacecraft or being ejected, something like that. And it makes you think, because there's people that think, well, maybe these UFOs or extraterrestrials are coming through us interdimensionally, and when they come into our dimension here, in other words, other things come through with them. And then there's others that look at it, if you want to say there's definitely a connection between the two, that basically they're being controlled by extraterrestrials. Or in other words, it's not a mistake that they didn't slip through. That sometimes they are controlled, ordered, whatever you want to call it, which that could add a whole layer of what if to the whole UFO extraterrestrial. And then there's people that will say, no, you know what, Bigfoot, let's go with the Bigfoot. Bigfoots are strictly an earth animal, human, I don't know what to call it anymore. In other words, they're not connected to extraterrestrials. They're just some type of lost primate, whatever, man, offshoot, but that there's nothing extraterrestrial or interdimensional about them. They've always been part of this world. They're part of this, of us, of planet Earth. And it's just coincidental that maybe there's sightings of each or the other in the same time frame. Could be, of course, a lot of people will hear, that there's stories of Bigfoot-like creatures dating back to before settlers, when the only Native Americans were here on the land, where they had their own stories describing Bigfoot-type creatures. But there's no mention of, hey, we saw them, drop down from a chariot fire, whatever. It could be. It's one of those things that you're really not sure which way it'll go. But I'm very, very curious to see if June does pan out to be the month that something happens. And by this I mean, because everybody thinks, well, the disclosure is going to come. Okay, what if it's not a disclosure, something that happens that forces a disclosure? All right, something that happens where they can't say, well, we've taken these grainy pictures or film and we're not really sure what they are. We kind of think it's this, but it could be, and we're still trying to gather evidence. That one of those, like, which amounts to Zero, nothing. You're not doing anything. All you're doing is gathering evidence. Man, that could take you forever to do that. You could be like going around and, you know, in other words, that doesn't mean you're going to get results. It's almost like buying you time. And I think Lon agrees with me. Short of a big, giant event where, like he says, like they'll land on the lawn of the White House, or or in the middle of a football game, or on a highway, or something that it's like the authorities are going to be forced to give a very, very, very good explanation. And then I come back to my original premise. I think despite a lot of what people think or hope or led to believe because of TV shows and movies, etc., that there's this grand conspiracy between the government, whether it's the United States government or any other government from all over the world, who cares, and the higher ups of the ETs all getting together and smoking a big cigar in the back room. I don't think that's it. I really don't think that's it. I think there's a lot more that's not known than what's known. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing that scares human beings more than the unknown. Despite what you may think, it scares them more to be told we do not know. Do you know where they come from? We do not know. How about their technology? Have you back engineered that? Is why we were no. We were just smart enough to develop what we have now. But no, we don't know. Well, do they like us? We don't know. I'm telling you, I think that we don't know answer would terrify people more than if people said, well, you know what? We've had this treaty or agreement or exchange or communications for the last 50 years or 60 years or whoever, and yeah, we're working it out. People would be like, oh, because I'll tell you what, how's this? If there isn't communication between humans and extraterrestrials, whether it's one species or more, I don't know. I've heard, different answers as to that. There's more than just one of them. It's not because of us. It's because they don't want to communicate with us. Because, and I'm going to go back to the Hollywood reference because that's the easiest one to use. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They use musical tones to communicate. It's almost like let's get down to the elementary kindergarten level, a universal language of music, and let's start with that. Okay? And I don't think that's it. I think that, God knows there's enough on the airwaves that they more could adequately understand all the different languages that are spoken here and written and everything. My point being that if there is no communication between us and extraterrestrials, is because they don't want any. Yeah, we could, but we just, when we're at the receiving end, we're like hoping, keeping our fingers crossed. But they could very easily communicate with us if they wanted to. And if they haven't, it's because they don't want to. And people think, well, Marlene, are you like fear porn kind of deal? No, I'm just saying that it's almost like, okay, do the scientists in the lab that use rats for experiments try to figure out rat language? No, it doesn't really matter because they're going to use them for whatever they need to use them, no matter what, for whatever purpose. Or, not even rats, there's different animals now that they use for experimentation, especially if they're very similar in humans to whatever is being experimented on. Okay, there's no attempt, how's that, to decipher what is the animal thinking? What are they talking about when they snort to each other? Are they saying, oh, I think I'm next? No, because they don't care, because that's not the purpose of why they're there. In other words, I want to say about the, it's like, doesn't matter because we don't care about them that much. How's that? And it's scary to think that we could have beings in this world that look at us that way. And by this, again, and I'm going to stress this, people don't want to put it in the good or the bad or the evil and the good. Not because they're necessarily evil. Maybe to us, what they do is evil. I'm not saying no. But they don't get it. They don't get it. They're like, they're thinking, they don't understand our morality. Because despite what we think, even though what Lon said was very interesting, that they have found that all these different species do have one thing in common, that they do believe in some type of superior being. Okay, but you have to understand, belief in a superior being doesn't mean that you believe in bad or good or in punishment. Let's say if you do something wrong and this superior being is going to punish you. Some beliefs, and you'll even see it in human civilization, sometimes belief in a superior being is figuring out how to keep that being happy, or appeasement. And I'm sure, you'll see that historically, from the ancient times today, you'll see civilizations that their religious beliefs were sacrificing to deities to keep them happy. And or even more if things were wrong, like if there was a drought, a famine, and pestilence, it's like, okay, what do we do? What do we, Or in some cases, it wasn't even that. It was the custom to sacrifice, or what we consider very evil things, to appease this deity, to like, hey, I'm giving you this one, so leave the rest of us alone. Like here. So belief in a superior being doesn't necessarily mean that they would be like, oh, they won't do anything wrong because they're afraid they're going to get punished by the superior being. Not necessarily. That could go a lot of ways, a lot of different ways. But it opens the door. I wasn't kidding. And you want people to forget about everything going on with current events. COVID, the economy. Well, now we've got a little gasoline crunch, all of that. Yeah. Want that to go way, 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 way back to the back page of the newspapers that don't get printed anymore. Have something concrete like a UFO encounter or like something like this happen. That's it. That's it. Forget about wars, battles, misunderstandings, anything. Everything will come to a complete halt, and then, man, talk about a coming to Jesus moment. That'll be it, all right. Let's see. Let us see. So again, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. I hope you enjoy the show, and I've got a lot of great guests coming on. And again, I hope that you will be with me next week for another great Stories of the Supernatural.